So Yanagi was like the strongest electric DPS in the entire game on her release, then power crept by a little bit by Anby, and she's probably gonna get power crept even harder when the feed is released. The seed. But one thing she's gonna do better than these DPS is that she is a really competent support. Her trailer gives that away long ago. She gonna babysit every single person in the section 6 and probably breastfeeding Sokaku. So Yanagi. She's probably the most complicated characters in terms of build in the entire game because of her role in different teams. She could be a main DPS, but she could be secondary anomaly, which is more of a supportive role. And the idea of secondary anomaly, her job is to enable the damage for the main attackers. And I specifically mean Miyabi and Owless, because right after when Miyabi procs the Frostburn or when Owless procs the Assault, the sooner Yanagi could procs the Disorder on top of that, the more damage that she's gonna be able to enable, while building up the stack for Miyabi and building the Sword Etiquette for Owless, which is Owless' term of stack. And the other role of Yanagi is gonna be the main DPS, which is self-explanatory. So basically, when you're playing against the lightning weakness enemy, whether you're playing mono electrics or you are playing general disorder team like Bernice and Vivian, you wanna use Thunder Metal Force set because the amounts of buff is just ridiculously good. And the second best DPS set, you're not gonna be able to imagine this, but I've talked about this back then, is the Fang Metal Force set, which is the physical set. And no, you are not hearing it wrong, but it has been tested that Yanagi with Jane Doe or Yanagi with Piper, if you are able to catch up with the anomaly builds up, you could expect this set outperforming other force set by about 10% on the physical team, which is gonna be Jane Doe, Piper, and right now, Owless. But if you're not able to catch up with the disorder, just stick to Freedom Blue. And the last thing is, if you wanna turn your brain off, it's gonna be Chaos Jazz Force set. It's not gonna be the best in slot for every situation, but it's gonna be the best performing force set if you average this out in all types of situations. So Chaos Jazz Force set is also perfectly fine. Her best Wenjin is gonna be her signature. It's gonna increase Yanagi's overall performance significantly because it has a lot of builds up. It's perfect for both main DPS and even better for the secondary anomaly. Then follow with Fusion Compiler, then the good old Gemini. Definitely get that free to play Wenjin. And enough yapping about the gears, let's get into how to parry every single thing and how to apply it in practice. So basically when you are playing Yanagi, and if you take a look at the top left, it has a blue marker and it represents which types of buff you're getting and also which stance you are having, because there are like two stances when you are playing Yanagi. It means that your basic attack is gonna be different in different kinds of stance, and we will just call this one blue stance. It's gonna give you 10% electric damage buff, and you could change your stance by just tapping the skill. And it doesn't matter if you have the energy or not. If you're gently tapping it, it's not gonna consume any energy. That's a really long sip. And this one is the yellow stance. It's gonna increase 10% penetration, basically equivalent to like about 12% attack or something. That's just a rough estimation. And every time when you change the stance, the buff from the last stance would last for 8 seconds. So you would see that 2 of them are still up there until the 8-second mark, and your last buff is gonna be gone. So every time when you play Yanagi, you're gonna remind yourself to tap the skill every once in a while, like every 5-6 seconds, to get all the buff from the previous stance. And the other way to get the buff is just simply use the skill, the EX skill. I could use it by just hold skill, and it would also automatically change the stance, and you're gonna find this way a lot more reliable. So default yourself to gently tap the skill or use the skill every time when you swap the Yanagi out. So that's the first tip. And the second thing about the Yanagi is that when you try to pop your ultimate, make sure that you get the buff first by just tap the skill, then use the ultimate, so that your ultimate would benefit from the buff. And the other way to change the stance is the chain attacks. So let's say if I use Astra to pop the chain attack, she changed her stat automatically. And every time when you use the EX skill, you're gonna get the buff called the Shilaban Show State. Basically, it's the Yanagi's buff from the Disorder. It's gonna increase 15% of the Disorder damage and dealing the Polarity Disorder. And this buff is going to last for 15 seconds. So make sure to proc the Disorder within 15 seconds. And man, this buff worked like bread and butter with the Owlets, cause both of them do have buff on the Disorder damage. Now let's talk about how does the damage is calculated when you are using the skill, because you could lose a lot of damage when you are doing the wrong setup. And this is the part where people get confused a lot when you are using Yanagi's Polarized Disorder, which is the EX skill. Sometimes they could barely do any damage, and sometimes they could do a tons of damage. So let me show you how it works. So basically the damage is coming from the last anomaly applied. So let's say if I use Billy to proc the anomaly, and my Billy is like level 10 and doesn't have any gear, and we are gonna let him proc the anomaly. Now we proc the anomaly, follow with Yanagi. Now we deal 1750 damage on Polarized Disorder damage, because the damage is based off Billy. But let's say if I use my fully built Miyabi and have her to proc the anomaly, and have Yanagi follow right through it, she got 59k of damage, and you're gonna get less damage if you use the Polarized Disorder a little bit later. But I do think that the damage is negligible, and the reason behind it is because it is based off Miyabi's stat. And one thing you're gonna pay extra attention is that if you're using EX skill on the enemy without the anomaly, it's not gonna proc the Polarity Disorder, and she could proc the Polarity Disorder on her own anomaly, so make sure to keep that in mind. So you do almost always want to use Yanagi along with a powerful anomaly to get the most out of her Polarity Disorder. And that's why she works extremely well with Miyabi and the Owlets, because both of them has very high base anomaly damage, but the Polarity Disorder deals a lot of damage. And the other thing that Yanagi's buff is doing is that it's gonna make your basic attack feels better. If you press basic attack normally, it's gonna get this basic one too, which is a really weak attack, so we wanna avoid that. And if we use the Yanagi skill, which we're gonna get the 15-second buff, and I hit the basic attack again, it's gonna start from the third attack. So you could skip the first two hits. So you kind of wanna always have the buff on, and you could do that by just default yourself to use the EX skill when you swap into Yanagi. Now let's get into her basic attack, which is also why Yanagi is hard. So if I were to simplify, the basic attack is gonna be looking like this. So basic 1 and basic 2 in both Jodan and Geidan, you're not gonna have any iframe, and you couldn't parry the enemy. You could tap the skill to change the stance. It's gonna have split second of iframe, but it's not gonna be reliable like this one. And basically Jodan, which is the blue stance, you would have iframe at basic 4, and on the Geidan you're gonna have the iframe on basic 3 and basic 5. So Geidan is definitely the more powerful one, but I don't think it actually matters that much. So you don't have to swap to a certain stance all the time. You might get hit a lot when you are using the Jodan basic 5, cause it doesn't have iframe, but you could just dodge counter it during the animation. So definitely get used to that. And generally you wanna use the tap skill at the end of the basic 5 so that you could chain into the other stance smoothly. But most importantly is getting the buff from swapping the stance. And notice the flash at the end of basic 5. That's an indicator for you to use the tap skill. And you do wanna recognize the Jodan with the horizontal slash at the basic 5. And you do wanna recognize the Geidan with the vertical attacks. And in both Jodan and Geidan, you could parry the enemy during or after the animation of basic 3 and 4. But you cannot parry in the middle of the animation of basic 5. But you could parry right after the animation of basic 5. I'm actually the advocate of spamming the button, but it's gonna be unreliable to parry when you are playing Yanagi. It's like you wanna stop the spamming when the enemy is about to attack and parry it with tap skill. So my recommendation when you are parrying with Yanagi is to just attack slowly and read the enemy's attack, and you parry the enemy accordingly. And the more effective way to do it is simply just wait for the enemy to attack. When you finish the basic 5, then you parry it. But to be honest, parry doesn't do a lot of things other than aura farming. It doesn't really do much. And that leads to the most powerful Yanagi's tech that not a lot of people praise about. It's simply to just dodge counter, then just follow with tap skill. This moveset is so powerful that it builds up equivalent amounts of anomaly like basic 5. While basic 5 both Jodan and Geidan, it gonna take forever to proc the anomaly, while dodge counter could proc the anomaly instantly. So you definitely wanna default yourself to dodge counter into tap skill over parrying the enemy. And just like dodge counter, her quick assist into skill is also equally powerful. So you do wanna dodge counter a lot with Yanagi because her dodge counter is just too good. And I shit you not, if you just default yourself into just dodge counter into skill, you would see a significant improvement in your gameplay with the Yanagi. And yeah, thank you for my TED talk, and see ya guys. Like and sub if you like it. Bye bye.